Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining. My name is Nicole Jackson. I'm one of the planning team members for Black Birders Week, planning team co-chairs for Black Birders Week, which is this week. We are on day 5, Avian Artivists, which focuses on using art as a form of activism to share a message about the importance, impact of birds, people, and conservation. So today I have with me a special guest, Alice Crowe, and you're wearing our Black Birders Week shirt from Bird Collective. Awesome. I got my blue one on too. And I want to, before we get started, just because I am a little behind, but that's totally fine. Figure it out, work it out. I am currently at the Children in Nature Network conference. I did a session earlier today focused on Black Birders Week. So keeping that trend going with announcements and just sharing information about what we're doing. And so having to do some interviews in between, scarf some food down, all the things with conferences, and finding a quiet space to actually host this talk. This is my last virtual talk for the week, so I'm super excited to have Alice be a part of the conversation and share her experiences, as well as the documentary she is working on. So with that, thank you to my team with helping make this possible. Black Birders Week planning team, also sponsors, this is National Audubon Society, Wild Birds Unlimited, and a bunch of partners, including Bird Collective, who helped us get these shirts made. Yay. So if you haven't gotten your shirt already, please do. It's pretty cool. I've gotten some pretty awesome compliments this week at the conference. So yay. And then we'll have time for questions. So if audience is tuning in, you can put your questions in the chat. Hopefully we can get to a few with Alice, and then comments as well. So questions and comments can be featured up on the screen. And then hopefully we can share some of those things, but if not, that's fine too. Time is of the essence. Everything is timed, right? I know I could talk for a good few hours, but we want to make sure everybody else has, things to do and all that stuff. So we want to make sure you can get to the next thing you have planned for your day, but also be inspired by today's conversation.
Yes.
So
yes.
With that, I am going to hand it over to Alice, and you can introduce yourself, where you are, what you do, and how you found out about Black Birders Week.
Wow. Well, first I have to say thank you, Nicole. And thank you to Black AF in STEM for inviting me and this wonderful merch. I love this shirt. And when you said that the theme was around crows this year and wings of justice, I said, wow, because I'm not just a new novice birder, but I'm also an attorney for 25 years. Wow. And so I just thought wings of justice about the crow. And I'm currently working on a documentary film about our family journey with the name Crowe. I could not turn down the opportunity to talk and to convey the story about the connections that we have with the crow.
Yeah, awesome. So we just actually had a comment pop up. Go Cousin Alice. Thanks for the love and support, Julius. Awesome. So yeah, if anybody's tuned in, thank you so much for watching, and please share in the comments, chat if you can, of where you're viewing from. It's always good to see where everybody's kind of tuned in from. All right, so we can get started with first question, because you are doing you are currently working on a documentary, but that required a lot of research and time to put, piece things together, learn about family history, what you were interested in, all of those things. Can you share with us a little bit about that journey for you, and how did you bring these topics together as far as family name and crows and what that meant? How did this all come together?
Well, this all came together because two things. One, I have had an incident happen that involved my son at his school. And it was a blackface incident where students put black on their face, colored their face black, they weren't black, and made a meme, a mockery of my son. And having the name Crowe, although the crow is a beautiful bird, it's black, slick oil feathers, the total essence of blackness, exotic. There's nothing cute, exotic, or special growing up with the name Crowe when you're Black in America, because there's a connection between all the negative connotations of Blackness with the Crow and our experience here through our journey through enslavement, through Jim Crow, even to the current day. The other thing is, a cousin was a master librarian and researcher, had really taken this project on. And she really engaged us to understand that our name was originally CROW. My grandfather, I had my grandfather and my great grandfather had the initials J. Crowe, CROW. My grandfather was born in 1873, right around the time of Reconstruction. His father was born in 1832, Jordan Crowe, with the initials J. Crowe, around the time that Thomas Rice had made that Jump Jim Crow dance, dressing, looking like someone out of the cornfields, using cork on his face, doing this dance they called Jump Jim Crow. And he made that song and that dance a hit that helped build the foundation of Broadway, vaudeville, and Hollywood at that time. And so it wasn't until my cousin Edith told us that our grandfather really changed his name. I know my father used to tell us that, and he used to say, my father changed our name and added an E on the end to distance us from the indignations of Jim Crow and taking agency over the name. He didn't have the choice. And why that's relevant is because my great grandfather Jordan was still enslaved after 1865. And he stayed on the plantation. There's a book about Face in North Carolina that says that he was a loyal and dedicated slave of, what is his name? Mr. Faison, Dr. Faison, Dr. W.H. Faison. And so he didn't get the emancipation that after 1865, but my grandfather did. And all of Jordan Crow's children were able to become educated. My grandfather in particular went to the Brick School, which was later an HBCU, Brick College. And by 1900 and 1905, he got a college degree and was teaching and was a educator in the public school system. So the journey was, why would my grandfather and his father work so hard to distance themselves from the name Crow? That's not our original name. That was the name of who originally owned my great grandfather. But why would they work so hard to make certain that we weren't identified with the Crow? Well, historically, before even the Jim Crow with Thomas Rice, Black people, sadly enough, were called crows as early as the 1700s. You could read in newspapers where a man had a crow-colored suit that many had on a black suit. And, you know, black is an ascription used to define us politically, socially, culturally, and it was equally another way to denigrate us, right? Because black is a color. And of course, that color represents something that is demonic, negative. And so when you call someone a crow, it is essentially calling them something tantamount to the N-word. And so I went on this journey because, of course, through Jim Crow came blackface, to understand why it keeps happening, why blackface is something that people just can't let go of. Why is the crow something so feared, so hated, so demonized, when it didn't start out that way? You know, not everything that is the color black is negative. You know, when you're making money, you want to be in the black. You want to, the Madonna and Child, the Black Madonna, that's something holy. That's not something demonic. But why with regard to this bird? And what do we have in common with that bird? What is our relationship with that bird? And so,
yeah, it's so interesting because there is, you know, the actually learned about corvids, you know, they're very intelligent, they are problem solvers. That doesn't get, you know, highlighted or amplified, or not even to say that, you know, Black people would have known that, you know, necessarily, but I think having that understanding that, you know, it's not the fact that they get this bad rap. It's totally, you know, to know them and like behavior and like, you know, survival pretty much is what their focus is, and not to harass people. As much as we want to put that on them, you know, they're in survival mode, you know, but they're very resourceful, they're very resilient and adaptable.
You know, in this journey, I had to look at something. I had to go back and say, well, what was our relationship before we were here in America? And that takes me back to Africa, where interestingly, Zora Neale Hurston told us that the crow was sacred. The crow was revered, highly intelligent. Folk tales, African folk tales, something we retained, speak of the crow as being wise, being as a counselor, a messenger, someone who has the ability to navigate and maneuver the spiritual world. And so the crow is something not only highly intelligent, but the crow can remember. The crow can recognize faces. The crow can use some form of logic and reasoning. And so what was our relationship then? And what did we retain? And I think when we look at something like Jump Jim Crow, the dance, and Thomas Rice is credited with creating this, we know that there are so many similarities to the dances that we've done. The ring shout, the buzzard lope, they're here. And that he probably, like other entertainers, appropriated the whole routine and then made up a story that sounded good. But the damage and the danger is that it gave a stigma to an entire group of people. And it is through Jim Crow that laws were developed to set back all of the gains made during Reconstruction at the time when my grandfather was born.
Wow. Yeah, and I think, thank you for reminding us of that knowledge, the generational knowledge. It's so important because of slavery, you know, being far removed through trauma, through oppression. We don't have that direct connection to, you know, that history and those stories and those relationships with nature that we definitely need to rebuild.
Well, Yes, and there's one thing that in particular that stands out about the Crow that we did
Mm-hmm.
retain. We learned from the
Mm-hmm.
Crow, and I think that the Crow is a teacher.
Yeah.
The Crow can't be controlled.
Mm-hmm.
In Africa, the Crow taught us call and response. That's why we still do call and response. So we do remember. It's when given the opportunity, we
Mm-hmm.
learn from nature. The Crow also has the ability to not be a snitch, only tell what's necessary
Yep.
to the
Yeah, when you
flock for
said
its
messenger,
protection.
I'm like, yep, that's the one I remember is the being the messenger, but in a not in a sly way. Yeah.
Right. The Crow has been talked about being a trickster. The Crow is
Mm-hmm.
here to teach lessons. And I think that the one beautiful thing that we can learn from the Crow, besides watching birds in general, because it's like going to theater, the Crow teaches us that it's resilience.
Mm-hmm.
Through all of the, let's say, trials and tribulations, meaning it's a target. People
Yeah.
kill crows. It's the bird that, for example, even in upstate New York, they have crow shoots to get rid of the crows. They offer prize money who can kill enough crows. In Canada, for example, back in 2017 or 18, the mayor of Chatham
Mm-hmm.
issued uh, an okay to kill between 2 and 20 million crows because they
Wow.
were roosting in between November and March in this city area. And so a few years later, the crows were dying of some kind of virus. So crows are allowed to be killed. Crows have
Wow.
changed their behavior to accommodate living closer to city life as an act of protectionism. Just like African Americans, Black people here in the South had to go through the Great Migration and leave the South for better opportunities, but also because of lynching, terrorism, and violence. And so too, the Crow has that journey. But
Mm-hmm.
in all of the Crow's trials and tribulations, the Crow is resilient. No matter how many crow shoots you
Yep.
have, how many viruses can take the crow out, what is it, avian flu?
Mm-hmm.
The crow still stands. The crow
Yeah.
still leads. The crow still caws. The crow still sings. You can't stop the crow with its very deliberate way that it flies. It's very determined. And the crow gets smarter and smarter every time there's an obstacle thrown in its way. It gets smarter.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's one of the things that we can learn, that it's strong, but it adapts.
Mm-hmm. Wow. Yes, that is also true. And I just want to make mention of your beautiful hair and concho shell earrings right now because I'm literally like, yes, 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 yes.
Thank you. A cousin gave me these. Rem. I have to give her a shout out because I just love these earrings.
So pretty. So you mentioned, gave us a little backstory about the history of your family name and how it came about and connecting with the history of segregation and Jim Crow laws. Um, what has that, I guess, how are those narratives surrounding crows, I guess, and Jim Crow um, intersect with the themes that we're talking about and connect to the crow, resilience, resistance, and survival in Black communities?
Well, I think that with Jim Crow, you know, the purpose of Jim Crow was not just to separate us, but to dehumanize us. And it was a marketing program that was probably the most successful marketing program there is, because the crow was used as a tool to convince people. For example, we look at cartoons, like
Mm-hmm.
Disney cartoons, other shows. Whenever something bad was going to happen, we hear the
Mm-hmm.
crow. So it reinforced the notion that, or the cartoon depicted crows as lazy,
Yeah.
trifling, tricksters. Jim
Mm-hmm.
Crow was designed to break our spirit, to tell us we were not good enough. It restricted our access to public accommodations and facilities like transportation, the trains, hospitals, the military, public spaces. And people think the first Jim Crow laws took place in Tennessee in 1881. They were in 1865 in Mississippi.
Mm-hmm.
And when you think about how these laws were designed to turn back all of the gains made during Reconstruction, we never gave up.
Mm-hmm.
We never stopped. The civil rights movement, we're still segregated. In fact,
Mm-hmm.
people think Jim Crow was only in the South.
Right.
The laws was in the North. I'm in New York.
I'm in
There's
Ohio. Yeah.
There's a school. The last
Yep.
segregated school was in here in Rockland County, here in New York, in 1943. The Brooks School, and it's a precursor, not really a precursor to Brown versus Board of Ed, but Thurgood Marshall came here because of a segregated school. And ironically, in that school, the Brooks School, that was located in Hillburn, New York, they sang songs like Old Ned and these minstrel songs
Uh-huh.
where they used the N-word, where they were being indoctrinated. A music teacher would come to that school. And although the teachers in that school were all Black and they were very well educated, the local music teacher would come to the Brooks School and they sang songs that were Stephen Foster songs, minstrel songs. Yeah. And so even if they were in an environment that was loving and nurturing and teachers cared and had expectations, it still seeped in that you were inferior, and blackface was something we laugh at. And so Jim Crow, jump Jim Crow, the evolution was blackface. So we have that journey.
And we became caricatures.
Yes. Yes. Something to mock and laugh at. And see, the crow is like a mockingbird. The crow will mock you. The crow caws, and the crow communicates to the wolves, to other birds. The crow asks for a response, calls, and then asks for a response. And so the only thing the crow is afraid of is the image of other dead crows. That's why farmers put crows out. And so too, Black people fled the South because of lynching, the hanging of Black bodies, the terrorism. So I think we have a lot in common with the crow. And I think our journey has been one that we can, I like to say, the similarities and the connections between the crows and the froze, because there is a similarity and a connection.
Yeah, I think about, the term murder of crows, but also how they congregate in the presence of death. Is very telling as well. And I think of that with the Black community. We have funerals, we have our gatherings, and we don't, there isn't necessarily sadness. There's joy that's celebrated of that person's life. And yeah, like you said, there's so many, really, when you really think about it, in terms of our historical systems and how those things are played out, but also just how we communicate with one another is a big part of that as well.
You mentioned the funerals, because crows surround their dead in a ceremony. And what's interesting is they're already dressed in Black. So they wear Black to the funeral, and they feel pain. And that's empathy and then they move on. But they also learn, and they do an investigation as to what caused the death. And you see, that's where we have to pay close attention, because they make a mental note to self. I have to avoid this. I have to be aware not to let this happen again. We have to act in a way that protects our lives. When you look at it, most crows, and I see that they are in city areas.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
Because they don't want to get shot by a handgun in the rural areas or the suburbs. They understand that in the city areas, there's light, and they go toward the light because they can look out for danger and enemies. And so too, we're in the city areas. We have to flock to somewhere where we can gather, we can have opportunities. So I think we can learn a lot by observing the behavior. And that's why I love what you're doing with Black Voters Week.
Oh my goodness, this is okay. So I instantly think of when you're talking about the city and like them just being very intelligent creatures, how they use the ways of the city to access food, to find food. And I've watched, documentaries where, they'll fly up high with their food and then drop it in the middle of the street where the cars are going. They know it's hit it and open up, a seed or nut or whatever they find, like to get to the good stuff. So like, that's, wow. Yeah. They're so intelligent. I think that's the other thing of just like, they have this intelligence, but also know enough to be able to return the favor by providing gifts.
Yeah. And they let the people who can do the work of opening the cracking the nut for them. I love that. Yeah. Yeah. That is.
Work smarter, not harder. This is very eye-opening conversation.
They're very interesting to watch. And, putting aside, they're not overly friendly. They're discerning.
Yep.
And when you see them, they're trying to tell you something. And I think that people are so afraid because of what they look like. They're expecting them to be an omen, represent something that's negative. But I think the best thing that people could do is not look at what their reputation has been in media and film, books and songs and music, but to actually go outside with a pair of binoculars and take a look for yourself. Because if you come to your own conclusion, you'll see that crows are beautiful, intelligent, and can teach us a lot about ourselves, particularly as it relates to flocking together in unity, moving in formation, moving in community, looking at themselves and loving what they see, looking at Blackness and loving what they see. When they look around in their community, when they're roosting, and there are, as in Canada, millions of them, they make room for each other. They share the same space.
Yeah, that's beautiful. And speaking of identity and acceptance and love of self, in what ways, because you're talking about, again, family names and the storytelling of how these names came about and the choice to change said name, to remove, yourself from that negative history. In your opinion, in what ways do you think family names and bird names convey a sense of identity or belonging? And how might that influence cultural or personal connections?
I think they do. In fact, if you have a name like we'll use Crowe, for example.
Mm-hmm.
I think about the book, The Adventures of Huckleberry Finn.
Mm-hmm.
The main character, one of the two main characters, was a enslaved man by the name of Jim. They called him N-word Jim. And they described him as something to the effect of as emotionally murky as the river, something to that effect, negative. And having the name Jim or the last name Crowe gives that connotation. And so you grow up being teased. You know, I had the last name Crowe growing up. Caw. You know, and I'm an identical twin, so it's Heckle and Jekyll, the two black crows. Your water fountain is over there. Ha ha ha. All sorts of things. And you learn to have other ways of responding, comeback lines that are an act of protectionism or defense to deflect some of that you get. And so you never really have the pride. And I can only imagine at the time my grandfather during Reconstruction was having to go through school because he was able to go to school, the Crowe Goshen School, from the man who owned his father, because his father stayed on the plantation. He was able to go to school, but with the name Crowe, even the books that were out at the time, there was a book, The Prisoner, during that time, that used a very negative and offensive way of describing a black man as a crow. So it was all around him. So in order to hold your head up, you have to be excellent. But names, I think, do play a role, because at the end of the day, that's what you have. You have your name. And if your name means nothing or your name is ridiculed, you have to work extra hard to make it mean something.
This is so layered. But I love it. Okay, sorry. This is so cool. Okay. Thank you for breaking that down. Like, just the weaving of, again, the history, the concepts, the stories. It's giving me a lot of perspective to the connections, the intersections, and why they're so important to highlight. So, was your work in this building this documentary, or stories or individuals you encountered during filming that had a profound impact?
Yes, I had a conversation with someone who had the name Crowe that had the E on the end.
Oh, okay.
And he helped me understand that I wasn't the only one that people had jokes. Growing up with the name, and his family changed the name. It was Larry Crowe. His family added the E on the end of his name, just like my grandfather did. So I then got the sense, yes, I understood, because Maya Angelou also told us in I Know Why the Cage Bird Sings that crow, spook, jig, we didn't like to be called out of our name because we'd been called those names for years. And so that conversation with him gave another perspective, that we weren't the only ones, and that to be a crow, you had to fight good, run fast, or have good comeback lines.
Wow. I like that you mentioned the Maya Angelou, Why the Cage Bird Sings, which everybody should read. And I really read it versus like really read it. There's so many hidden messages within that. How do you think this film will contribute to a broader understanding of Black identity and history?
Well, I
or
hope
documentary.
that
I don't want to say, but
I hope that it will help us connect with our humanity.
Mhm.
I hope that it opens up dialogue and it gives us a sense that if we can see an animal that loves itself, that sees Blackness as something beautiful, maybe we can diminish the amount of anti-Blackness that we have, and that we can look in the mirror and love ourselves. And we can understand that this journey that we have to define ourselves, name ourselves, because yeah, it's not what people call you, it's what you answer to. But maybe if they knew this journey of the bird and its evolution and blackface and Jim Crow laws that set us back at a moment's notice, and the revival of these laws and how it was revered in Africa as something sacred to something that is demonic or dehumanized, we wouldn't use the N-word as much as we do. It wouldn't have as much currency as it does today.
Wow. Yeah, that's definitely the naming really again stands out to me. In thinking about the symbolism of crows, again, they can resemble or symbolize resilience, intelligence of the Black community, and show that they persevere despite the legacy, oppressive legacy of Jim Crow. But also the historical context. I feel like you're talking about remembering, but then also for the forgetting. There's so much of that history that we, I think, intentionally forget for fear of, not righting those wrongs or finding resolve in the harm that's been created. And I think that gives insight into the laws that were created, insights into this systemic racism that persists in our society. So by understanding this history, we can understand the roots of racial inequity and injustice today, because the past is still connected to right now, very much so.
Exactly. And of course, we get outside and we participate in birding, which is healing, which is relaxing, which is being outdoors and being in nature.
So it comes back to this message that I feel like I've been sharing throughout the talks that I've had of nature being honest. And I think being exposed to that honesty through activities such as birding, hiking, walking, being still in nature, I think it shows you, it exposes you to those truths of what nature really is, wildlife, just by watching them.
Yes.
And not just listening to, hearsay, but like really watching them and experiencing them in their home.
Nothing beats experience.
Yep. So I'm even more fascinated to be able to have opportunities, and thinking about corvids specifically. When I did my trip to Colorado not too long ago, being able to see the variety of corvids. So there's the raven, there's the magpie, there's the blue jay, and like they're different, the plumage and their calls and their songs, and it's like their own individual personalities of what makes them them. And what makes them unique and special. And because we're amplifying the corvid family and just birds, like especially blackbirds, because I feel like any blackbird is going to get that negative, that bad rap, helping us see the beauty in them and the uniqueness of them.
Yeah, I agree. I think that, whenever I think of birds, I don't want to say how old I am, but the movie The Birds, Alfred Hitchcock.
Yep.
And although those birds they look like pigeons or birds that were white birds.
Or even, I think, starlings, probably.
Yeah. Whenever something bad was going to happen, you heard, caw, caw, was crows, something negative. So I think we've been conditioned, really, to be anti-crow. And I think getting out in nature is what we need to really undo all of that conditioning and actually take note on how they get along, how they navigate conflict, how they have a common purpose, how they have rules of engagement, how they play a role, how they support each other, how they don't get too close, but they can observe from a distance. And I think those are all survival skills that we will need to make us better.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think about that with them being, what was the word you used? Not afraid, but there was a word you said earlier about not cautious. Sorry, I can't recall the word.
I can't remember either.
But they're not like afraid to approach. They're like, but I think that requires trust in so many words. There's some trust that needs to be built. And like, you're talking about them recognizing faces to anyone that, has created harm against them. But I feel like you can still rebuild that trust. It's not like there is an opportunity there, but I think they're helping us understand that too, that relationships require trust. And that takes time.
They also, one other thing I want to mention that Maya Angelou said, when people show you who they are, believe them.
Believe them.
And I think crows really embrace that, because I've seen news reports where crows were dive bombing people and, flying and pecking them on the head and, kind of bullying and taunting. And these were people who had done something to them, and they remembered the face. They remembered people's gait, walk, their mannerisms, and that they never forget. And so they have no doubt when they see someone what it is. So I think that's interesting, and that Maya Angelou may have been a birder.
Yeah, oh, she definitely was. She definitely was a birder. Sorry, the word that I was looking for was discerning. And your sister also. Again, thank you all for the support and for tuning in. This is a really amazing, interesting conversation, and it's really helping me reflect. And I think about birds so differently, like having these conversations, because it's not, it's just bird ID, but I feel like the intersections are just as important, and help us, helps that information stick, but also helps us rebuild relationships with nature and wildlife, in a more loving way. We just have more respect once, we learn more about them and get more information about their behavior. And I feel like they're very observant. That's the thing with us. They will be paying attention whether you notice it or not. And I realized that thinking about my own research, not research, but monitoring when I did, when I first got into birding, doing an internship in college, and that was one of the things we had to pay attention to when we were out looking for active bird nests or banded birds. So I was monitoring cardinals and flycatchers. But there were places we would go to where, we'd have equipment where we would use it to, a mirror attached to like a pole or something to look up into a nest that was too high, to see if it had eggs in it, or if it was, if the female was on the nest or things like that. But we would have to pay attention because the crows would be around. So we would have to wait because they were watching us. Like, oh, we know where the food is. We know where to go. So we would have to wait until, they would fly off or whatever, before we moved forward with our work, because, that was, us doing our work, research, gave them an opportunity to find food. So very intelligent. And yeah, they were definitely, groups of them just ready and waiting, especially if they didn't have to work for it.
Yeah.
So we have Deja. This is such a powerful conversation. Thank you.
Thank you.
Anybody has any questions for Alice, please feel free to put those in the comments or chat. We'd love to have a couple questions at least. And then, there's another, sorry. Making sure I'm paying attention to the comments. Morgan says, beautiful metaphor of the discerning crow not being overly friendly.
I think that's something we all have to work on sometimes.
Mm-hmm. Again, those lessons.
You have to earn the crow's trust.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
You don't get in the crow's inner circle that easy.
Because they have to be clever or risk their safety.
Exactly.
Thank y'all in the comments. Okay. I love this. So any other kind of reflections that you've had in building this documentary, and like how is it helping you move forward with building a relationship or thinking about your relationship with your family moving forward?
I think we gather at a relative's house in Harlem, we call a gathering of crows.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it has, for me, brought us closer together. And I think it makes us more determined to carry out the mission of what Jordan Crowe was trying to do when he stayed on the plantation. And share our story with other people and behave in a way like crows, where we foster community and connection.
Mm-hmm.
Because that's very challenging, but it has to happen. And I think that's something that I would, if you say, well, what do you want to leave the viewers with? It's that. Use the experience, even birding, to get outside, to be among safe people and safe spaces, and to just be, but also reflect on your own families and how you can gather and have a gathering of crows.
I'm going to go back to, because there's some more comments that have popped up, and I want to share. Julius
Crowe, and he's named after Julius Crowe, our grandfather.
So they're learning stuff too from your interests and your research, and going back, they're learning things too about these layers, these intersections. That's so cool.
I just want to chime in that Julius Crowe is
Yeah.
also a brilliant educator, just like his grandfather. He followed in the path of what Jordan Crowe wanted, because Jordan Crowe educated his children. They became teachers or ministers. And Julius represented that in our family.
Mhm.
The vision, the mission. He got the memo, the assignment.
Yeah. Thank you, Julius. That's awesome. Okay, we have another up here. Never thought of the parallels between crows and Black folk. Thank you so much for that reflection. Our name is truly powerful. That's beautiful.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Randall.
Oh, okay. This one is really nice. I like this one. So proud of you, sis. Our ancestors are smiling.
Thank you, Alicia.
And then, yep, going back, the trust has to be earned.
Exactly. That's another Julius Crowe's grandchildren who she's a master teacher, and they went into education to continue the vision and to live out the dreams of bringing, educating in our community and being more than just a teacher.
Yes.
Yeah.
And crows are educators. Crows are educators.
Yeah.
Crows. I love that. Yes, indeed. So you mentioned kind of like what, you know, what would you be leaving with the audience with? And I think of, you know, obviously the call to action and the storytelling and the symbolism. Like these are really important things. And using those stories and the symbolism of crows should not just be about raising awareness, but also inspiring action. It should motivate people to actively work towards racial equity and justice in their communities and beyond.
Yes, exactly. And build community, form connection, build a village.
Yes. Yes. Because they will continue to teach us if we are open and paying attention, we will learn some things for sure for a lifetime.
Yeah.
So with that, I don't think anybody has any questions. Let me just double check. Okay, cool. I want to move on to just one final question for you before we go into how people can connect with you.
Sure.
Alice. What have you gotten? I don't know how much you've had a chance to participate in this week's events or engagement online up until this point, but what have been some highlights for you in, you know, being a part of Black Birders Week this year?
I learned more about the relatives of the crow that I didn't know existed. I never knew the blue jay was related. I know, you know, my sister and I had interesting experience. A blue jay took a cracker out of her hand when we were children. You know, we still laugh about it. But I didn't know that. And I like the way that you slip in information without it being a science class. I love Black AF in STEM because STEM is fun.
Yes. Yes. Yes, it can be very educational. And, you know, we've had questions about the name Black AF in STEM, and it can mean what you think it means. But also, you know, for younger people, it can be, you know, and fun and fantastic. And flying. I mean, whatever you want to make it, and that, you know, speaks to Thursday's theme about, you know, activism and art. And I think having that understanding of, you know, being our true our authentic selves, our bold selves, our creative selves. Again, we're not monoliths. And the resilience and the adaptability. Also the joy, just the joy of being able to come together in this way and share our interests. And even speak to the things that, we didn't know and are learning about, and incorporating more of that into our daily lives is inspiring. It's uplifting. So I can be a part of that any day of the week. I'm like, yay.
Yeah, I know that's right.
So that's why I wanted to have this conversation with you, this discussion, to help others see the intersections of what, some people might think doesn't even go together, but there's such deep connections.
There is.
And they need to be brought to the light, to the forefront. And it's part of our, experiences. It's part of our everyday, because we are on our own journey of truth.
Yeah.
And recognition of the people that came before us, our ancestors, and even thinking about our elders. We're libraries. We have such an immense amount of knowledge and information to share and to learn and grow from. And I think with these topics, it really helps us continue to do that.
And when
so it's not just about the birds. It's about the birds, but not just about the birds.
Yeah. When we remember, we're even more powerful, and we give ourselves space to remember, and we swap notes, and we realize that we do know about this bird. We do know about the messages. Aside from picking up folk tales, African folk tales, but we do have deeper connections.
Yes. So what's next for Alice?
Well, I have a book coming out. It's really launching Juneteenth. It's called How to Get Black on Track, a self-empowerment guide for people ready to make a mindset pivot. It was a book I wrote years ago, and I was encouraged to republish it, put it out, to help people pivot, not panic when problems arise.
Right? Where have you been all my life, Alice? Where have you been?
Out birding. No.
I don't even, wait, how did we even meet? How did I? Oh, no, you reached out to us. You emailed us. And then
we had a talk. Awesome. And, when I saw Black AF in STEM, I said, what is this? And then I saw this little notice that was when basically I'll paraphrase. We don't do token things. Don't ask us to participate in something just to, on the surface.
Yeah, sometimes you get laid out like that, because some people,
response email they're sending me. I got to let them know this is for real. All right. Who are you playing with? But I was so intrigued because I knew about the incident in Central Park with the brother, birding. Yeah. And I liked what you all were doing. It gave me a whole nother way of looking and learning more of who the Crowe is. Not just the Crowe in my family, but who the Crowe is. And I like how you all do it.
Yeah.
Roosting and resting and relaxing. I get it. I get the importance of self-care. Advocacy and healing.
Yes. Pivot, not panic. That's what I'm saying. I'm going to keep that in my arsenal. I love that. I love that. Yeah, there's so many, I don't know, there's so many connections to birds. We have yet to scratch the surface. With any of these topics, I feel like we're just getting started with a lot of these intersections and helping people see the kind of these full circle moments that you can have from making these connections, also just having conversations about the layers, whether it be in regards to healing from loss, learning something new, finding adventure. Like there's so many ways to connect with birds. And then for, the Black community, I think it is really focused on like celebrating self, celebrating community, celebrating our stories, our experiences, and really uplifting each other through those experiences, through those stories.
It's one of the most constructive things we could do.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
When you go outside, I was with my binoculars. I took my daughter out and we were at the lake and we were just observing the theater. And a woman came up to us. And for a moment, I jumped because I thought about the incident in Central Park.
Yeah.
And I said, oh, no, here comes Karen. She's going to get in our business or ask us what we're doing, sitting on a park bench with binoculars. And she paused and then she said, oh, that's the bufflehead duck. I love those. They're my favorite. And she walks by. And I said, oh, okay. Put the cell phone back. I don't have to hit record. But she was acknowledging that we were taking the time and sitting there watching birds. To some people, it makes them feel like, how dare they? To others, I can see why they're watching the birds. And we were just taking in the day, my daughter and I relaxing and just watching the birds. And it was like, it beats fishing.
It's its own piece, right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yes. When you give it that space and time, it's so much more enjoyable. And then you are ready for the next, moment like that. So I think of when you were talking about the crows, or even I feel like blackbirds in general, when they congregate, people, again, there's that fear because they don't understand. But there's safety in numbers. I think that's another with the term murmuration and how, you see all these birds flying in sync with one another, but there's a reason for it. And it's for protection. It's for survival. It's for communication. Exactly. It's building community. And it's necessary. It's necessary.
Yeah, it is. It is necessary. They move in groups. They're called a murder, but it's necessary.
So with that, I'm going to share some info with everybody. If anyone's interested in connecting with you, you did provide some contact info. So we'll start with social media. So you have your Instagram at Alice T. Crowe. Anybody's interested in connecting that way. And are you, do you frequent social media, or is that something you're like, limit yourself from? Because I know
I do a fast every now and then. But I will connect on Instagram.
Okay. Then we have your website. And can you tell us what's on the website exactly?
Well, acrowflies.com is my production company, and it's where we give information about the projects that we're working on. And so that's where you can find what we're up to and more as we update on the progress of the film and when it's done and what our journey is. We'll post it all on acrowflies.com.
And then will you have your book on here as well?
Yes. Yes.
Awesome. And then lastly, you have your LinkedIn. So if anyone's interested in connecting via LinkedIn, that is an option as well. All right. Any last thoughts before we wrap up?
I'm just so grateful to you, Nicole, and Black AF in STEM, and all the people who tuned in, and the Blackbirders and Blackbirders Week. I'm grateful. Thank you so much for having me. This was definitely, it was such a pleasure.
Pleasure here. I'm so glad I got to connect with you and find time to chat with you and just learn more about who you are and what you're passionate about. I'm very much that person, just like, I feel like everybody else is so much more interesting than me. So like, yay. I get to learn something new and different. So yes, I was so very excited to be able to put this together with you, and again, show a different perspective of the connection between storytelling, family names, and birds. And I hope the audience got a few good takeaways and notes of reflection, points of reflection to take away from today and even the rest of this week into the summer. We're getting back to that same feeling, I think, from thinking about 2020 and the layers of connections to, what we need to heal as a society and come together and build relationships with one another. And I think it's just as important as it was in 2020. And I also just want to mention, again, thinking about the people that have passed. So George Floyd, it's been 4 years since his passing, since his murder, on the 25th of May, which was also the same day that the Christian Cooper incident happened. So just thinking about names, that's what comes to mind for me, George Floyd, and countless others. So we remember them for their light.
Yeah. And that's so important that we do, and we bend to the light and look for ways that we can come together to not undermine all the good that we and our intentions that we had coming out of that, that we remember.
Well, I thank you so very much, Alice, for being a part of Blackbirders Week. And please continue to participate for the rest of the week. And I encourage audience, anybody else watching, to do the same. Tomorrow is day 6 already. We will be focused on canary in your coal mine. So that is the hashtag in reference to being, thinking about birds being indicator species and warning systems for us humans, because we really don't do a good job of paying attention to things. So understanding the importance of wildlife and how they are very much indicator species, and let us know, about the things we really need to pay attention to for our survival and for theirs as well. So tomorrow is Canary in Your Coal Mine, and highlighting the environmental justice, conservation topic stories in relation to birds and people. So if you have anything to share about those experiences within your community, your neighborhood, please do share those with us online. And hopefully in your community, if you're attending an in-person event as well. So, we think about climate change, we think about access to water, clean air. It's the same for the birds. Same for the birds, and then same for the people. We're looking for the same things. We want to have a safe place to live and to roost and to gather and, keep ourselves healthy. So all of these things are connected.
Yeah.
Very much so. So we can't separate them. We can't silo them. And I feel like we have so many examples of that. So,
and if we allow the birds to die, we suffer.
Yep.
It throws off the balance of nature and the ecosystem.
Exactly. The balance is so important. So thank you all again so much for tuning in. I appreciate you all. This is my last, at least I think. I think so. This is my last virtual discussion. Tomorrow is Friday, right? Friday.
Right. Yeah,
tomorrow is Friday, and there is a focus on outside of thinking about indicator species and how those intersections connect with humans and environmental justice, but also efforts from the community. So what are you doing in your community to show that you care about the environment, about birds and protecting them and their habitat, as well as collecting information for us to do better to help the environment. So thinking about participatory science, community science. There are people out there in our communities that are doing amazing things, but it's not being amplified. So if you know someone in your community that's a leader within conservation, environmental justice fields, or even ornithology that are helping gather information for us to better understand how we can better take care of nature and wildlife, please share that. And then Saturday is just because it's Saturday. We want people to get outside. We want people to bird. So with that, just us birding, play on words, wings of justice is our theme, justice birding. We really want you to be intentional with your birding this go around. So we're not just thinking about birds. It's people, it's conservation, it's environmental justice, and how we could do a better job of bringing awareness, but also a call to action for the rest of the year. So thank you all. It's been wonderful. Again, thank you, Alice. I really appreciate you. And thank you for wearing a shirt.
I love it. Thank you. I love it.
Really check out. Haven't gotten a shirt yet, please do. Bird Collective. We partnered with them. And then awesome artist, Latasha Green of Jitterbug Art. They are on the website, I believe. There's a featured profile of them. So check that out on the Bird Collective website to learn more about their work and installations. Also have an opportunity to, or don't forget to check out the giveaways. We are still doing giveaways through Saturday. So hopefully you have a chance to enter and win something. We have some really cool prizes. And yeah, happy birding. Thank you all again.